is, running it down on these niggas.
Sex, drugs, money, and murder, my nigga. You know how we did it, my nigga. Still be painting them bitches, my nigga. Ripping that roll and fucking your bitches. Sex, drugs, money, and murder. 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 Niggas, they never will hurt you. Niggas, they never will hurt you. Sex, drugs, money, and murder. Sex, drugs, money, and murder.
Got the traps right, understand how to get that. Ran down on them niggas with a flip back, knew in them.
It's our night for me and you. What's goody, ladies and gentlemen? It's your boy, Bullets Gotti. Back with another one. So, this video I'm gonna talk about point guards. I watched it, you know what I'm saying? I was out of town, so I wasn't able to watch it. So I was able to watch it as soon as I got home. I sat and watched the whole documentary. I watched it this morning, actually. I didn't even watch it last night. So I watched it this morning. Great documentary. I'm going to keep it real. Great documentary. Great story. I sort of fuss with a lot of dudes was saying, yo, Ed Booger not in there. You know, a couple others was not in there. I sort of fuss. And I understand it. I felt like, shout out to Creative Control, you know, shout out to, you know, Kevin Durant and them, you know, but here's the thing, how I feel about the documentary. Great documentary because it did tell a story about streetball and just New York City basketball in general. But I see where they was going with it, you know. And the thing with Sebastian, a lot of dudes say, yo, why Sebastian? I mean, no disrespect. But Bassy wasn't 90s, 80s New York City streetball. The dudes that they got in there was, you know, Kenny Anderson, Kenny Smith, you know, Marbury, God Shamgard, you know, who else was in there? Mark Jackson. You know, those dudes right there was 90s and 80s New York City basketball. Kareem Reed, this is 90s and 80s New York City basketball. So the documentary is based on 80s and 90s New York City basketball. It's not based on the 2000s. Yes, a lot of dudes, yeah, Kemba Walker's in there, but they not talking about Kemba Walker. You know, there's a lot of dudes that's in there. They talking about 90s and 80s New York City basketball. Now, in my opinion, who they should have had in there was Felipe Lopez. You know what I'm saying? Because he was the pinnacle of New York City street basketball, Felipe Lopez. We're going to be technical. Especially, you know, what he did in the game in that 90s era. Okay? I understand they want to go so much, you know, with the street balls, but you got to be honest, though. I think they should have did more pulling the more of the street ball element, because a lot of dudes that they had in it was like the success out of street ball. I felt like the Future should have been there. They had A-Butter, you know what I'm saying? But the Future definitely should have been in there. You know, I think it should not only just been about point guards. I think it should have just been about all the players that played street ball, especially in that era, that 80s and 90s era, because you got the Future, you got A-Butter, you got the Executioner, you got, you know, Kareem Reed, you got Carlton Hines, Kenny Hutchinson, you know, Pearl Washington they spoke about. You know, you got a lot of dudes, man, that they didn't really talk about in that documentary. You know, so yeah, you got Ross Strickland, you got all of them, you know, and they talked about Riverside, you know, Riverside Church, you know, Gauchos, which is important places for a lot of street ballers, a lot of kids that play street ball, especially in that 80s and 90s era. So I get where the documentary was based off of, was the 80s and 90s era. But I really felt like if we're going to do a documentary, man, you got to have everybody, the intricate players in there. You know what I'm saying? But I understand they, they was highlighting, you know, Skip to My Loop, Rayful Olston, and Mark Jackson, Kenny Smith, and Rod Strickland, God Sham God, and Stephon Marbury. I understand that. I understand they was highlighting them, because they was the ones that made it. They made it to the league, and not only that they made it to the league, but they was great in college basketball. So we talking about dudes that was the dudes in college and that made it in the league. So that's understandable. I get it. You know what I'm saying? To have them in the story, that's a dope thing. You know what I'm saying? And Rod, and it's good to see Rod Strickland. Good to see Kenny Smith. Good to see Kenny Anderson. Good to see Mark Jackson, Rayful Olston, and God Sham God, and definitely good to see Stephon Marbury. Because keep it real, Above the Rim was based on Marbury. A lot of people don't know that. That movie was based on Marbury's life. It was loosely based on Marbury, and it was based on Joe Hammond and his brother. Because Joe Hammond, it was like, I think Leon's character was based on Joe Hammond and Joe Hammond's brother, because Joe Hammond's brother was hustling. He was that dude in the streets. And a lot of people don't know that movie was based on Marbury, because Marbury was the hottest prospect in New York City. But I'm gonna say, the thing with the Ed Booger thing, yeah, Ed Booger should have been in there. Ed Booger definitely should have been in there. Kenny Hutch, Future, Carl Nas, because they was important figures out of that whole streetball, era. A lot of dudes played, a lot of dudes that didn't make it to the league, they winded up, but I understand what they was going with it, because it's about the success stories. And a lot of them dudes were success stories, and Ed Booger is an unsung hero, just like Carl Nas, an unsung hero, just like the Future, these are unsung heroes, but they were important figures in streetball history. Ed Booger definitely was. If you ever seen the movie Soul in the Hole, the dude was a beast when it came to streetball. He was a problem. Like, dudes couldn't handle him. He was shaking and baking on that court. So I get why they didn't include him in the documentary, but I also felt like they could have had him in the documentary, but I get where they was going, because you gotta look at it, the guys that was in there was what you call the successes of streetball, because they went over streetball. They went into the league. God Sham God played with Washington. You get what I'm saying? When they was the Bullets, and then became the Wizards. Rayful Olston, he played in the NBA, played with the Rockets and Orlando Magics. Marbury played in the league. Mark Jackson played in the league. Rod Strickland played in the league. These are dudes that played in the league. You know what I'm saying? Kenny the J. Smith. These dudes played in the league. So I get why what they was going with. These dudes took, they playing method from the streets into the NBA. And really love that they gave Pearl Washington his flowers, because Pearl Washington is a streetball legend, and he was an NBA legend. And then they gave Tiny Nate Ball, like, Tiny Nate is a legend. These are dudes that are legends in basketball that you can't really, take none away from them. So, Pearl Washington definitely deserved it. His flowers in there, but I felt like if they was gonna do it, man, I felt like they should have just. I really felt like they should have talked about more of the street, but they was able to talk about who they was able to talk, and it's understandable. You know what I'm saying? It was a great documentary, you know, because it highlighted dudes that went from streetball to the college, and they were the top tier dudes in the 80s. If you talk about 90s and 80s basketball, these guys was the success stories of 80s and 90s New York City basketball. You know, it's the truth. And don't get me wrong, Booger was a beast, but these dudes was the success stories of 80s and 90s in New York City basketball. To go to the league, from college to the league. These dudes went to the league after college. So, you gotta give them their flowers. So then I understand why the documentary is about dudes that were success stories. Documentary is not really about, you know, street legends. Is really about who was the success stories out of New York City basketball. And those guys was the success stories. So, salute to the point guards. Salute to Rod Strickland. Kevin Durant, who is behind that. Creative Control, if you don't know about Creative Control, that's Oogie and forgot my dude name, man. He used to be with Kanye, but they doing a lot of big things with the Kanye documentary and this. They doing a lot of big things. So yeah, salute to them, man. Salute to Kenny Smith, because Kenny Smith is, I think, is a producer of this documentary. God, Sham God, you know, and Rayful, and you know, all them dudes, man. And I understand they had to go with who they had to go with. You know, Mark Jackson and all them, they went with the ones that was like, I would say the game changers, because everybody, you know, take their styles. You know, a lot of dudes still playing like Rod Strickland. A lot of dudes are still playing like Mark Jackson. A lot of dudes are still playing with, like, you know, Stephon Marbury. They still playing like Skip the Malou. They still playing like, you know, Kenny Anderson, you know, Kenny Smith. They still playing like these dudes to this day. And that just shows you that how pivotal of players they are and how legendary their game was. You know what I'm saying? These is dudes that made their bones in Gauchos and Riverside Church. These brothers made their bones in Riverside and Gauchos. You know what I'm saying? So definitely shout out to the Gauchos, shout out to Riverside, shout out to Gusto, shout out to, you know, R.I.P. Mike C and all them, you know, Rucker and all that. You know, shout out to all of them, because it all came from that EBC game. You know what I'm saying? It all came from the Rucker, Gauchos, and Riverside Church. You know what I'm saying? A lot of these brothers came from there, man. And it was good to see Cam, because people don't know Cam. Before Cam was rapping, he was in college, had a scholarship to play ball. So you already know what it is, man. Salute. It's your boy Bullis got it.